Okay, guys, like I talked about earlier this week, we're going to do notes like this today since I am gone. The sub should have passed out a blank note sheet for you to use, like a template. I have a document that looks just like that on Canvas that I want you to fill it out that way so they match up, and then you can take notes on that sheet. Keep that sheet over the weekend because then you will use it on Monday as well, and then you will turn it in when we are done with class on Monday so you can get points. So just make sure that you follow along with the video. Because it is a video, you have the ability to stop and pause and play as needed. So make sure that you're doing so in order to get all of the notes down correctly. Today, we're going to start focusing on global crime, still talking about inequality as they obviously match up together, but we're going to start branching off in this direction so we can look at some criminal activities around the world as well. First is a fact that global crime is 15% of the world's total economy. That basically means that all of the amount of the money in the world that is traded in 1 year, 15% of that money is connected to illegal activity. So human trafficking, gun sales, drugs, various different things, that anything that has to do with an illegal activity and is profitable, that money is 15% of the total world's economy in any given year. When we start looking at crime, the first question we have to ask ourselves is crime necessary? And usually that first bullet point really catches people off guard. So crime is integral for human society, which basically means that it's necessary. We need crime to happen in our societies, which, yes, does sound weird because we typically don't want crime to happen. But realistically, what that means is that crime helps our societies advance. It pushes us to create new laws, new rules, to label things differently and to change with the times as needed. And it's what's really kept our society going for the last couple of millenniums, because we keep on editing ourselves to fit the new narrative. Globalization obviously does expand those boundaries of people who then become criminals. So again, we use it as a labeling tactic. And crime shows that gap between the rich and the poor, again, as it continues to increase. So more people are able to get a more steady income through committing crimes. Two examples of that would be like the person that loses their job and chooses to break into people's houses during the day, steal things, and then sell them for money. Or you can use like your Breaking Bad scenario. You have the main character in Breaking Bad getting diagnosed with cancer. He knows that he is probably going to die, so he wants to make sure his family has money after he's gone. So he begins producing meth, selling those drugs, and then making money to make sure that his family is set up in the future. A transnational crime organization is basically a group of 3 or more people that break laws or set up different criminal activities on an international basis. They can exist for a long period of time or a short period of time, as long as they're acting together. And the main goal of that is committing one or more serious crimes or offenses. And yes, you can still just break one law, but work on an international scale and be considered a major crime organization. Finally, they're obviously seeking some sort of financial or material benefit. And then if you look at the map over on the right, all the different colors are representing different things. So for example, the green lines is cocaine out of northern South America being traded across the world. And then you can see the couple of areas highlighted in that light blue color marked as piracy. We're not talking about your patch and peg leg type of pirates. We're talking about Somalians or African pirates that are on ships that then take over larger ships, steal all of the products, and then sell them for money or hold them ransom and collect a reward. Now, when we start talking about the mafia, a lot of you are probably thinking like original Godfather, and that's not necessarily what we're talking about yet. The mafia, as it relates to globalization, technology has linked countries like never before, and we've been talking about that for both of our last units. However, as it continues to widen that gap, making the upper class more money causes that illegal demand to increase because the poor classes are now more willing to break laws in order to fight for those societal relationships that the upper class has. Think of like the examples that I just gave you a minute ago about the person losing their job or the teacher that got down with cancer. Now, the Soviet Union is the first time that we really see what we call the mafia as a legitimate mafia. And so the mafia that we're talking about here is once the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, there were thousands of former military and KGB, which would be like the Soviet Union CIA, that were out of jobs, and they then just transitioned from their jobs that they had lost into like private police forces for hire. And so we started calling them the mafia because of the types of things that they were willing to do for money. So in the picture below, you can see the people behind the wall in those uniforms. Those are KGB operatives that then transition to a life of mafia and basically being hired hitmen or hired security that would often do illegal activities to make money. Now, this is what you would normally think of when we talk about the mafia. This is your old school Italian guy sitting behind a desk, smoking a cigar, talking with a deep accent. The mafia in that situation in Italy acts as a middleman. So for our example, we're going to sell guns from America to Africa in exchange for minerals like gold and things like that. So in that scenario, America is going to take the guns, give them to the middleman, the mafia. The mafia will then transition those weapons to African rebels. The African rebels will then give the mafia minerals, who then are transmitting those to America. And then eventually what happens is the mafia is the group that's profiting off of this because they're taking on the most risk. If anything bad happens in the deal, like they get caught or something goes wrong, the mafia are the people that are responsible because they're the ones that have hands on the trade and transaction throughout the entirety of the entire transaction. So as you can see in the picture to the right, Italy, again, in the shape of the boot, there are 4 main groups of mafia organizations in Italy, and you can see those 4 main groups located in those 4 different colors. Now, these next couple of slides are going to be very, very important because you are going to have a map portion on your test. And so what this is talking about is how global crime really has become. It is now a business. It's an enterprise. And so you have 3 different groups. You have producing countries, distributing countries, and consuming countries. And for my example, I'm going to use drugs. If we're talking about drugs, your producing countries are going to be the countries that are going to manufacture the drugs. So Afghanistan, Colombia, and then the Democratic Republic of Congo are going to manufacture those drugs. They're then going to transfer those drugs, usually through some sort of middleman, to a distributing country. Those countries are going to then distribute the drugs to the countries that would then use the drugs. So your distributing countries are Mexico and the Balkans. Those countries, like I said, will distribute the drugs to the next step, which is the consuming countries. And these would be the countries where, again, would be sold then on the streets for people that have drug addictions to then use the drugs. So those countries for the consumers are going to be the European Union, or Europe for your best example, Japan, and then the United States. So again, the producing countries will make the drugs, hand those off to the distributing countries, who will then send the drugs to the consuming countries, who then use the drugs. You're going to have some time in class today, and looking at this next slide, which is a map of the world, you are going to need to find those 8 locations. So utilizing a map and utilizing Google, spend some time in class today finding these 8 different locations across a map. And again, the hardest one might be the Balkans. So make sure that you specifically look for that one because that's probably one that you haven't looked at before. Again, here's a map. Utilize Google, spend some class time finding those because that is what you will have to do on a test. Finally, you have a globalization of organized crime graphic here. Again, in your notes, I want you to just take a couple of minutes and look at this and kind of write down some things that stand out to you. Look at the amount of money that's being traded back and forth. Look at the products that are being traded back and forth. And just look at the amount. We're talking about, for cocaine, 320 tons of cocaine. That is a ton of cocaine in more ways than one. So just kind of look at the graphic, write down a couple of things that are standing out to you. And finally, we want you to watch this Agro Mafia video. Take some notes as you watch about what you see when we mix agricultural products with the mafia, so you can kind of see how those 2 enterprises work together. Again, take notes on that. And then make sure you keep your note sheet safe over the weekend, so when you come back to class on Monday, you can finish taking notes before you start your work on Canvas. Thanks for hanging out and watching the video. Make sure that you have a great week.